if I live 100 years, I'll just never, ever be able to tell the story the way it really happened. These young kids who, you just run up to them, and when we were all boxed in, they were all around, and they were all over our perimeter, and we're throwing grenades, and I got pretty close, and just run up to one of these kids and say, Marine, we're going to get out of here, aren't we? And the kid look up to you and say, you're damn right we are, Skipper.
In 1966, I just finished 4 years of college at Hofstra University, had a BA, and I had received a draft notice from the Great Neck Draft Board. And they told me to report down to Fort Hamilton, which I did. And at the very last moment, I decided to go into the Marine Corps. And the reason I did that is these Marines walked into the room where we were, and they said they wanted volunteers for the greatest fighting force in the world. I was very impressed. I knew that I was on my way to Vietnam, and I felt that I'd have a better chance of surviving with the Marines because they had such a good rep and they never left anyone behind. Also, I was a really crazy surfer, and I thought I could surf in the Marine Corps, which I did. So I went from private to captain. So I was an enlisted Marine, and I made private first class, which is one of the proudest moments of my life. And probably the proudest moment was graduating from Parris Island. I felt like I was a Marine, a part of, the Corps, the history. It was very proud. So I'm what you call a Mustang. I was enlisted for a while, and then I became an officer, and so I went through that whole thing, which I think was really good, to be enlisted and be at Parris Island and be with those young Marines, being with a lot of blacks, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of poor whites. It was a really, really good experience for me. To this day, that makes me different. So we traveled together the whole time, from the States to Okinawa to Vietnam, and finally to the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, which were actually in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone at the time. So we joined them, I think, in early July 1967. That's the same place where John McInerney was. He was with Bravo Company, and shortly after getting there, I was with Bravo Company. There had been a really big battle. 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, I think, were basically annihilated, and they sent in 1-3, I think, and 2-3 to help them. When I got there, literally flew in with a helicopter and got off the helicopter in a jungle. My experience is I didn't see any live people from 1-9. All I saw was bodies. That was my initiation into Vietnam. When I first got there, I actually was assigned to the 81 millimeter platoon. It's a really big platoon with, I think, eight really big mortars. I got that assignment because their platoon leader had just been killed. But within maybe a week or so, I was reassigned to Bravo Company, and I took over the 1st platoon, a rifle platoon. When I took over that platoon, I had the good fortune of having a very good platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Head, and a really good, both outstanding platoon guards, Sergeant Falafini, who he got killed not too long after that. Oh, no, actually, maybe 4 or 5 months later. But it was a hard thing to do, to be responsible for a platoon of Marines. It was a heavy responsibility, and it weighed heavily on me. It was, I was always afraid of making a wrong decision and getting some of my Marines killed unnecessarily. I knew they were going to get killed. I just didn't want to get them killed because of something I did, a mistake that I made. You never know when things are going to go wrong. And I'll give you an example. This is one of the worst things that happened to me, but as far as, you know, what happened is one night we set in on a hill, and this was in early August 1967. John McInerney, his platoon was tied in. He was at the 3rd platoon. I had the 1st platoon. We set in on this hill, and I was ordered to send out a listening post of 4 men. And the code name was Snoopy, so because I was Bravo 1, it would be Snoopy 1. So I sent them out, and you know, I guess about 1 o'clock in the morning, they were at about 300 meters, maybe less. I radioed out to them and I said to them, if everything's okay, click once. No, click twice. If everything's not okay, click once. They clicked once. I woke everybody up. I mean, starting with Sergeant Head. Then the whole company got on alert. And it was a moonlit night. You could see. You could see things. And then we heard this small arms fire. I mean, a lot of small arms fire. And it was obvious that the listening post was moving, and they were moving back towards us, and they were firing in our direction. And a machine gun team had moved up from the position I had put them in. They had moved up to get a better field of fire, and now bullets were coming in at us. And I was looking around, and I actually saw this machine gun would just flop over, and someone started screaming, "Corpsman up, Corpsman up." And we ran over, and Sergeant Head got there before me. And this machine gunner, Corporal Astorti, who was assigned to my platoon, he had been shot. A round came in, hit his helmet, and then went down into his left eye, and he was dying. And so I'm talking how things can go wrong real fast. And Sergeant Head picked up his helmet as he was dying, and he said, "Lieutenant, you know, this is a small caliber bullet." What he was saying, it was an M16 and not an AK-47. And when the listening post came in, you know, they were standing not even 10 feet away from Astorti, who was dying. And I went over to him and I said, "Did you get any incoming?" Because I was, you know, we heard on occasion that the enemy would pick up an M16, and they just wouldn't look at me. They just wouldn't speak to me. So I knew that they had panicked, and when they panicked, they ran back towards us, and they didn't realize they were firing at us, and one of them had killed Astorti. Then it got even worse, because Sergeant Head said to me, "You know who that is?" I said, "Yes, it's Corporal Astorti." And he said, "Did you realize, Lieutenant, that he had finished his tour?" And that was like, that was one of the worst moments I had in Vietnam. I walked away, he was dead. And I walked away and I thought about his parents who were waiting for him to come home, and their suffering was about to begin, and it would never end. And the story doesn't end there, because I did go visit the family. You know, I did go visit the family, and it was horrible. But so that was my first loss, my first KIA in Vietnam. And actually, his replacement, I remember the names, David Calabria. He lasted 3 days. He was with us for 3 days and he got killed. He was a machine gunner. So things could go wrong real fast. and you didn't know where it was going to happen. But I didn't want to make any mistakes, and that night I thought I did make a mistake. I thought I had put the machine gun in the wrong position, and him moving around was, you know, I felt responsible. I just had a lot of luck. You needed an incredible amount of luck. You needed luck, especially when you first went there, because, and then you just had to come up to speed as fast as possible. I'm one of the lucky ones, so is John McInerney and Jack McCormack. We're the lucky ones. My dad was very patriotic. He had been in the Army twice, once during the recession and once during the war. And he taught me that you fight for your country, right or wrong. So I thought in the beginning that I was doing the right thing, that I actually owed my country service. However, when I got there, early on, early on, like maybe August, I started to realize that there was a civil war going on, and we weren't fighting against the communists. We were fighting against people that wanted to be independent, and we weren't fighting them over there so they wouldn't come here. I figured that out, but I kept it to myself. There were a lot of Marines that thought we were trying to stop communism in those jungles. I didn't believe that after August, but we never talked politics. We never even talked about our losses or our KIAs. We talked a lot, and we became very friendly about one another. 24/7, I was with enlisted men. Those are the people I would speak to. You don't come across officers too much because, except when the company commander calls them up, you see the other lieutenants. So you spend all your time with enlisted Marines, and you get very close to them. I use the phrase that we loved each other to death. That means that we would be there for one another, and that was really true. Of course it was true. I was the platoon leader. I had a platoon sergeant, a right guide, and then I had 3 squad leaders. Each squad was supposed to be about 12 men. A Marine rifle platoon can get pretty big. It's 42 plus attachments if it was, full strength. So it could be like close to 50 men with machine gun teams and rocket teams, corpsmen, but usually I had about less than 30 men. And sometimes, most of the time just 2 squads because of, wounded, sickness, all kinds of things. So most of the time we were under strength. I think there was one time where we came up to strength, only one time. So when you say a battalion is supposed to be 800 men, we were usually a little over 400. I was there, and my mission as their leader was to keep them alive any way I could. And my life was expendable. I had to keep them alive. And I did pretty good at keeping them alive. But that was the real, any good officer, I think, figured that out. Forget about the war, just think about your men. It changes everybody. What it does to you is it strips away your humanity. It really just, you want to survive, and you'll do anything to keep your men alive and to stay alive. So I wrote home that we basically, we became animals. We did what we had to do, and I knew that I was losing my humanity. I wrote home to my sister and said, "I'm losing it, and I think I just have a little bit left." And I held on. I actually had a little bunker. You can get killed at any moment. It was horrible. It was almost driving us crazy. I think I was almost, some of those incoming barrages, I was so terrified that I think I was about to go insane. I was so frightened. Up there was everything. It was rockets, artillery, mortars, recoilless rifle, And we had no defense to the rockets. They were delayed detonating. They would go through anything. They'd go into the earth and just explode. So if it landed near enough, it's just luck. Alpha 3 was, I think it was southeast of Compiègne, but it was right below the DMZ, so we were in range of everything. The NVA they were certainly north of us, and I think on occasions they were south and east and west. They were all around us, and there were times when John saw this and I saw it. They were bringing in replacements. We only could be supplied by helicopter. We had a small LZ right behind my bunker, and sometimes when they were bringing the replacements in, they were coming from our ship in some cases, because we were the special landing force, and some of those Marines would jump off the chopper and get killed, and we put them back on. I never spoke out about the war in Vietnam, ever, because I left too many friends behind that were alive, and too many of them were killed. I couldn't do that. I've had nightmares as soon as I came home, recurring nightmares, basically the same thing, incoming that you can't do anything about, rockets, artillery, getting overrun, because we almost were overrun one night, and then the other nightmare is being sent back for a second tour. Can you imagine that? That's a nightmare, that I've got orders to go back, and I'm saying to myself, but I've been there already, and there's nothing you could do. You got to go back. When we came home, we were the losers that lost the war. That's how they treated us. And I think that's one of the reasons, or the main reason, we didn't speak about it for so many years. What they learned is they separate the warrior from the war. We were never called warriors. We were never called heroes. In fact, one of the best books that ever was written about my battalion, actually, was called The War Without Heroes. This famous photographer was with our battalion. But that's the one thing they learned. But calling everyone that served a hero it doesn't make sense to me. And when people walk up to me now, 40-something years later, and they say, thank you for your service, they haven't got a clue of what our service was about. Did I mention in 2002, by coincidence, my ex-wife, I call her my non-wife, did not work out because of Nam, returned to me all the letters I wrote to her while I was in the Marine Corps, and my mom, the same thing. I never knew they had the letters. And I started reading the letters in 2002. I was 59 years old, and I went back in country, and my wife, who I've been with now for over 40 years, came in one day and saw where I was at. And she said to me, get some help. She meant counseling, and get in a writing class, which I did. But when I went to counseling and I was diagnosed in 2002 with post-traumatic stress disorder, I got angry. And I stopped going to counseling. But then I continued writing, and I realized that was a form of therapy, writing about being in the Marine Corps, especially combat. And I went back into counseling in 2010, and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have severe hearing loss from my time in combat. I'm deaf. And also I have chronic ischemic coronary heart disease caused by Agent Orange, which I just found out about in 2013. It's completely, all of these things have really diminished me. I'm at the point where I can't practice law anymore the way I used to. Now I'm mad because, especially because of the Agent Orange. We drank it, we ate it, we bathed in it, and it made us really sick, and the government denied it for a long, long time, and only admitted in 2010 that if you have heart disease like me and John McInerney has, it was caused by Agent Orange. They don't even fight you on it anymore. but they don't treat us right. You know something? Most people don't care about what we went through. I have not given up speaking out on, on occasion and on my show, and this is like, speaking here is very important. But most people do not listen, do not care, they do not understand. And if someone says to me that has never served and been in combat, they know war, that's an insult to me. They do not know war. They might know something about it because they saw a movie or movies or they read something. They don't know what we know. And most of them, 99.99%, don't care about knowing what we know. So, but I'm not giving up. I mean, this is how you get the word out. Because I have hundreds upon hundreds of letters, they refresh my recollection. But there's something weird about being in combat. Whatever's going on gets etched into your skull, your brain, your memory, and it's there. And we could recall it in vivid detail. See it and remember dialogue. I'm not talking about everything, but the really bad times, I could just bring it up like a movie and write about it. So writing is it's very difficult in that I go back, but it's okay. I get it down right, I think. I write about it, but like I said, it's there. And most of us, especially Vietnam, had pushed it way down, but it's not gone. It's always there. And given the right moment, it will come back up. And the writing brings it up. But I think the writing is also therapy. I know that a lot of people read my stories. They don't hear me, but if I can get them to read, and once those stories are written, you can't unwrite them. They're out there. Now I'm ashamed that when I came home, I took off my uniform. I got off the plane, took a taxi to my parents' home in Canarsie, and I took off my uniform because I knew that we weren't welcomed. We were not welcomed. Like I said, there were times when I thought that I had very little humanity left, but I think what I brought back is it didn't. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry when I first came back. I think it made me feel more for people, because I wound up being a defense lawyer, and that's defending people, and I wound up defending veterans. In fact, my first felony case, my serious case, was defending a Vietnam veteran that was facing a minimum of 15 to life that had been framed by some cops on a drug case. That was my first felony trial. So I've been, when I came back, I think I had more compassion for individuals, not for the human race. The human race is a disgrace, but for individuals, I set out to help people, and I'm still doing it. And I was pretty confident too, because my experience in the Marine Corps, that nothing was going to be as bad as that. I don't care what it was. No trial, no situation, I was going to be able to handle it. And I am that way, I think.